There are dumb arguments, and there are dumb arguments. There are dumb arguments where it takes a moment for you to even realize that it is a dumb argument. And then there are arguments where you're like, okay, that's utterly insane. Right on its face. If that's somebody who you're talking to that's kind of in a basement after you guys have smoked a few, fair enough. You can forgive that. That's kind of one of those human things that's my boy. You know, he was talking out of his head that day, but he was kind of inebriated. It's another thing when it's a host of a CNBC news show that talks people about their cash. Conspiracy theories should not be a part of that process. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the host of Progressive Soapbox. And I am watching Stephanie Kelton get beat up pretty roughly on CNBC. She did her best. I would say she needed to be more aggressive in that area. Stephanie Kelton is not necessarily a socialist. However, in that capacity, she was trying to defend democratic socialism the way that Bernie Sanders was explaining it. And she got whooped. Not because she said anything wrong per se, but more so that was a feisty bunch. You're essentially talking to a bunch of capitalists about socialists. You need to be a little bit more aggressive. But as I'm finishing that, I see a back and forth between the host of that show, Joe Kernan, going with someone else. And they get on the subject of climate change. Now, you can be a capitalist that believes in science that says, okay, I want to make my cash, but I want to be able to have a planet to make my cash on. And you can be a capitalist that says, fuck everything else, I'm not going to be here, what do I care? It's a hoax. Hell, you may even believe it's a hoax. Which, I often wonder why. Nevertheless, he gets into a back and forth with the guy. He puts this up. I love this. All right, he says, what historians would definitely wonder about in the future centuries is how deeply flawed logic obscured by shrewd and unrelenting propaganda actually enable a coalition of powerful special interests. Now, at that point, I'm thinking, oh, he's talking about the top 1% and capitalism, and how unfettered capitalism in the way that we have it is somehow the best and right approach. I thought he was referring to the conversation he just had with Stephanie Kelton, in the way that these guys essentially was putting out propaganda, rah-rahing the top 1% and how this is the only way to go about it. I thought that's what he was talking about. He went a completely different way with this. He was talking about climate change. Who knew? To convince nearly everyone in the world that CO2 from human industry was dangerous planet-destroying toxin, it would be remembered as the great mass delusion of history. All right. Somebody, one Mr. Pac-Man, damn it. Where is it? Right here. Someone says, great. Let's pipe CO2 into your house at higher quantities than carrying capacity and see how quickly it is dangerous. His answer to this is astonishing. He says, you do know humans exhale 100 times the concentration of atmospheric CO2. Ever had a Coke? Be careful, laced with poison. And I looked at that tweet. I was like, what? David Pakman says, damn, I used to watch Joe on CNBC when I was a kid growing up. He's a depressing. He even responded to him. Yet you still grew up to be a sinning millennial socialist. That is depressing. No, what's depressing is this. You do know humans exhale 100 times the concentration of atmospheric CO2. Ever had a Coke? Be careful, it's laced with poison. I looked at that tweet for a good, maybe 2 minutes. I said, there's something extraordinarily wrong with that tweet. 2 minutes might even be too long. And I said, wait a minute. I mean, the issue with climate change is not that CO2 is poisonous in the abstract. Like, it's not that you as a human being one day says, oh, I'm going to die from CO2 poisoning. But that's not really the argument that people make with climate change. The issue with climate change is the amount that we are pumping into the air, be it from animal agriculture or be it from our industries. If I'm not mistaken, 70% come from just a few companies. It's creating a situation where it either keeps heat within the planet itself, Again, it's not that you're going to choke to death because of the CO2 in the air per se. Again, it has to do with it being so much in the atmosphere that the food and the crops that we eat lose a bit of nutrition because they're being clogged with CO2. Keep in mind, plants eat this stuff, so it creates somewhat changes to the plant material itself, but also keeps in heat. The issue is the increase in heat, not that you die of poison. This guy is a rich millionaire that's sitting on television advising people on stuff. And his brain is not strong enough, not adequate enough to put that together. You're not going to die of poison from CO2. That's not the argument. That's never been the argument. I've never heard anybody make that particular argument. The argument that I've heard the scientists made is we're pumping so much into the atmosphere that it's keeping in the heat within the world, in which case it increases the heat, which creates changes within the environmental system itself, making our habitable space more difficult to live in, with increased floods, increased tornadoes, increased hurricanes, increased hot spots in the various regions of the world, changes in immigration patterns, refugees. All of these things are an element of what we're doing from the standpoint of the planet. And mind you, depending on heating up the planet enough, you may get to this thing where there's a runoff heating effect where the heat keeps going up because of the methane that's released in the processes. Now, Joe doesn't look at this from that angle. He only looks at it from the angle of stocks. If you ever watch, one of the most fascinating things to watch is the Money Channel, CNBC, Bloomberg, and watch them talk about the world. It's the most fascinating point of view in the world. It doesn't really matter what happens in the real sense. It only matters in the abstract sense of how much money they can make off of whatever is taking place. Joe, I suspect, is strongly is probably one of these people. Watch it for like a week. It's astonishing. I was watching it during the time of Boeing crash. I was at the clinic. I was watching it on television. And it's expressed and it's talked about mainly in the sense of, oh, Boeing messed up here and Boeing stock is going to take a hit. Not the fact that all of those people that died because of capitalistic impetus of them getting an engine out on the market to compete with somebody else that they were having trouble competing with. That's not really the angle. The angle is Boeing stock is going to lose a ton of money because Boeing put an engine out that wasn't up to snuff. Conspiracy theorists. Joe Kernan. And yes, I'm saying he's a conspiracy theorist when 90-something% of scientists are saying this exists, this is real. We're seeing real world phenomena. We're seeing these changes in our environment. And you have a money guy saying, I don't believe it. Fair enough, anybody can say they don't believe it. Fair enough. But it's also fair for me to call you a conspiracy theorist. Conspiracy theorists. Joe Kernan. Believing that the fact that human beings exhale 100 times the concentration of CO2. In fact, I just showed a tweet. Believing that you do know humans exhale 100 times the concentration of atmospheric CO2. Ever had a Coke? Be careful, laced with poison. Believing that that is an adequate argument against climate change. An argument that has nothing to do with the price of tea in China. That is an adequate argument against climate change. Be careful where you get your news. One Mr. Joe Kernan on Squawk Box. If I'm not mistaken, he's on Squawk Box. Is it Squawk Box? Yeah, Squawk Box. I'll leave it there. Thanks all.